right. Good evening, good evening, good evening. And as we like to say, this is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. It's another day's journey, and I'm so glad about it. I want to welcome all of you to a conversation and an opportunity for us to consider this moment in America and this moment as we fight for and contend for the soul of our nation, as we seek to save our democracy. My name is Alyn Waller. I'm the senior pastor of the Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church, and I am joined by a number of friends from literally around the country to have a conversation tonight under the caption of Faiths United to Save Democracy. We are gathered. I am grateful for the number of churches that have joined us. I'm grateful for my own church, Enon Tabernacle, who are willing to use this moment that is normally Bible study to expand our conversation, and that is to talk about voter registration, voter education, voter mobilization, and voter protection. So we're grateful. I hope that you are excited to be in this conversation. I will be introducing to you some of our country's foremost leaders in addressing the political scene from a faith perspective. Tonight, we are Christians, we are Muslims, we are Jewish, we are interdenominational, we are Baptist, we are Methodist, but we are American, and we are committed to this country. We still believe that the documents are good. We still believe that the intention was right. And we still believe that we have the ability to impact it for good. And so I'm grateful that you have joined us. And in just a few moments, I want to introduce you to the real convener. I'm honored to play some role tonight. But I think you need to know that Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, who is the coordinator of the Faith United to Save Democracy, who is also the president of the Skinner Leadership Institute and the co-convener of the National African American Clergy Network, is who brings us here this evening. And so if you would allow me, I want to have a word of prayer, and I'm going to turn you over to our sister to help us begin this conversation. God, I bless you and thank you. I thank you for the opportunity to participate in one of the greatest forms of government, and that is our American democracy. I thank you for the privilege of voting, and I thank you for the challenges that are in front of us. Tonight, we've come with various faiths and persons to talk about what it means to live in America, what it means to contend for the soul of our country, and what it means for us to save our democracy. Bless each speaker tonight, oh God. Bless all of the words that ultimately will be used for the upbuilding of our faiths and the upbuilding of this country. I pray this in the name significant to me, the name of Christ. And for his sake, we do pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. And now I want to turn over to our convener for this evening, Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner.
Thank you so much, Dr. Waller. You have been an amazing state lead for Faiths United to Save Democracy, and you have been amazing in Pennsylvania, protecting the sacred right to vote. You know, yesterday we remembered the amazing legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I do recall one of his earliest speeches was called "Give Us the Ballot," 1957, in which he said, "In this juncture of our nation's history, there is an urgent need for dedicated and courageous leadership if we are to solve the problems ahead and make racial justice a reality." And tonight, justice is what we are talking about. Justice is God's business, so justice is our business. But 65 years later, justice is not a reality at the ballot for us. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was gutted in 2013 by the Supreme Court. And to make matters even worse, in 2020, after the election, after we all went to the poll, over 49 states enacted or proposed 440 anti-voting laws in a democracy. And so that's why we're here tonight. We're here saying that this is not just an attack on the Black and the brown vote. It's an attack on the elderly, the disabled of every race and background, poor people, students, those in the military, and those who are returning citizens. It was in 2014 that Skinner Leadership Institute, the National African American Clergy Network, Sojourners, and the Center for Faith and Justice at Georgetown, we were working mainly on the Black vote. But, after looking at these 440 plus anti-voting laws, we said, this is about everybody's vote. And so that birthed the Faith United to Save Democracy, which really is simply a nonpartisan, interfaith, multiracial, and multi-generation voter justice campaign that seeks to just develop what are the tools, what are the resources people need. No matter how many anti-voting laws are out there, we can still vote. But how do we do that? That's what this call tonight is about. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from some amazing, courageous, and dedicated leaders from different faith community talking about what's at stake in their community. But then we're going to also share some information that you as imams and pastors and rabbis and faith leaders in general you can host your own webinar. You can host your own voter justice workshops or forums with the information we're going to share with you tonight. So let me just begin by sharing my screen, because I want to share with you just for a few minutes the toolkit that is the essence of how we help our people vote. And you'll hear a little bit more about the spiritual background from Reverend Jim Wallace of this campaign, which other people may treat as simply political, but we see it as a faith walk that we are on together. These are some of the leaders of that. It's very diverse. We have not always worked together, and we need to start again to make the work that we do connect and interrelated, because that is our strength. Let me just take a moment to share what the campaign between now and the election, the midterm election, when most of our people don't even come out to vote in large numbers. We cannot afford to have that this year because we're setting up for 2024. So phase one is where we are right now. Phase one, Reverend Waller talked about it. We are talking about voter education, registration, let me add identification, because that's a problem, mobilization, and then voter protection at the polls. So we're doing voter justice webinars in 10 states, of which Pennsylvania is one, helping people to really gather, like, why am I voting? What's important to me? Why should my family and I get to the polls? And of course, tonight you'll hear about your voting rights from our Lawyers Committee representative. The next phase will begin in May, early May, late after Easter, late April, when we talk about we are watching. And what are we watching? We're watching state election officials. They work for you. You and I, we are taxpayers and citizens. They're not private citizens. They work for us. And therefore, we should be meeting with them, just as we're meeting tonight, to find out what is the state of play for Pennsylvania election. Where will the drop boxes, the early voting, whatever your rules are, and they differ in every state. We get that. But whatever they are, we need to know if polling sites have been moved, if there are changes in the laws that impact the elderly, will there be wheelchair ramps, language support, whatever the support is, we as faith leaders need to know so we can help our people vote. So that's phase two. That's the we are watching voter protection phase. Phase three is voter mobilization. Now in phase one, and two, we are also working on voter identification because there are a lot of people who don't know what ID to take. If you are in Texas, you can take your gun license, but your student ID won't work. In some states, your driver's license works, but not other forms. We need to know what they are because there are organizations that can help people get their ID in time to vote. Phase 3 will begin in the summer, God willing and COVID willing. We will be able to get out and do rallies with some of the, Jim Wallace is talking to Steph Curry, and there are others. Our friends are talking to John Legend and others, people who are who happen to be entertainers, but they're also citizens, and they want to help us to ignite particularly young people to vote. And then our final phase is what we call voter protection. That's when our 24/7 clergy hotline will begin to be available, and when we start organizing our chaplain to get out. What is at stake? Everything is at stake. Voting rights, affordable health care, quality education, criminal justice, protection of the houses of worship from attack. All of those issues and more are at stake, and it's our job to bring that to the light in our communities. What are some of the barriers? Language, polling stations move, people being purged, those who are served their time not being able to vote, just the lack of rudimentary service to people being able to vote. That is our job to help overcome those impediments. This slide, if you can go on right now online to turnoutsunday.com. That's Turnout Sunday. That's one word, turnoutsunday.com, and download this very toolkit. This one page, if you don't read anything else, the 10 things that anyone needs before they go to the polls. What form of ID do they need? How do they vote if they're formerly incarcerated? If English is not their first language? If they're disabled, if they want to vote early, if they need an absentee ballot, they need to know how to cast their ballot. When the polls are open, am I still registered? All of those issues your people need. You need to be posting this on your own websites and having your own meetings about that. And I'll show you a couple more that I think are important for houses of worship, because the biggest problem we have right now is voter registration, lack of people being registered to vote. The white community has a substantial number, but the Black community is now 9 million unregistered. The number in Pennsylvania of unregistered African Americans is larger than the number that the other person won by in 2016. So I'm just saying that we really do need to get busy. The Asian vote of unregistered is over 50%, and the same with Hispanic vote. That's the work that needs to be done over the next 7 months. And the final thing I want to show you is that we need to know what IRS allows houses of worship to do. And so there's one slide that'll simply tell you the do's and don'ts for houses of worship. That's also in the toolkit. Not only is that in the toolkit, but also not just the do's and don'ts, like social media posts, samples, announcements that you can make, scriptures that pastors and imams and the rabbis can use to do their sermons and the like, tips on helping and getting young people to vote. And the final thing I'll say is the poll chaplain program is the essence of this whole campaign. That's why we formally called it Lawyers and Collars. It's Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Lawyers on their 24/7 hotline, and clergy in their collars, their sacred collars, whatever that is, at the polls protecting vulnerable voters. That's our task. That's the work we have to do together. If you are interested in getting the toolkit, again, download it at turnoutsunday.com. And if you're interested in receiving updates about Faith United to Save Democracy, you can go into the chat right now, and there's a Google form that you can use. Let me finally say that whenever I get discouraged with all the attacks on our vote, and I sometimes, we all do get discouraged, I think about a woman I had a chance to meet before she died, Fannie Lou Hamer. in her latter years. And I remember asking her, we were giving her an award at the Congressional Black Caucus, and I had a few minutes backstage with her. How do you do it? How did you do it when it was dangerous and legal? She said, when God puts something in you to do, you just do it. And so I pray that God has put in us that something to do tonight, and that we won't back down until we together make this sacred right to vote a reality for all Americans. Thank you so much, and God bless you. And now Jim Wallace will talk to us about what this campaign is. Is it political or is it spiritual, Jim Wallace? Reverend Jim Wallace.
Well, the word that comes to mind as I see you all is the word blessing. The blessing I feel and just seeing all your faces and being with you. I want to build on what my brother, Dr. Reverend Waller said. This is a fight. Let's call it a spiritual battle, spiritual warfare to save democracy, but I would say also to save our faith, because this is a test of democracy. It's also a test of faith, of our faith. Now imagine all those attacks, Barbara talked about, you hear noise all the time in Pennsylvania about these attacks on our rights and what people are trying to do to take away things so precious to us. Imagine all that noise, hearing all those attacks. Imagine that in your head. Now listen to a text in the middle of all the noise, a text from Genesis, chapter 1, verse 26. All the noise. But then God said, let us make them, humankind, in our own image, after our own likeness. And that's our strength. We are this movement you see on the screen. We are the Imago Dei movement. We are all reflections of Imago Dei. And voter suppression is nothing less than throwing away the image of God. That's what it is. It's throwing out Imago Dei. So this picture makes God, I think, tonight very happy. God's smiling at us tonight. But what they're doing in Pennsylvania to take away the preciousness of that voting right makes God angry, and they better come to terms with that. Because, they're afraid. They're afraid of what we're committed to is multiracial democracy. In fact, if this nation doesn't achieve multiracial democracy, we will lose our democracy altogether. Let's be clear about that. There are people who are well-funded and have power, and they want to prevent our changing demography from changing our democracy. That's what they want to do in a sentence. But here's the thing. When politics fails, faith communities intervene. So our politics is failing all around, and we're going to intervene. You can see who we are. We are multiracial. We are multi-faith. We are getting better at being multi-generational. And the Imago Dei movement is powerful enough because our God is big enough to beat whatever they put in front of us. So you are precious. Your people are precious. That's why our vote is so precious. They want to take away our dignity and our voice, and we will not allow that to take place because of a text that we believe in about all of us being made in God's image. So the Imago Dei movement is getting organized, and they're in serious trouble. I talked to Jim Clyburn just today at a signing at the White House about healthcare, and he is ready to go. Raphael Warnock is ready to go. Terry Sewell is ready to go. Chris Coons, Senator Chris, they're ready to go. They're ready to go to support us and what we're doing. So I am so blessed by seeing your faces, and I know some of your stories and your work, and I'm just blessed to be among you tonight, one of you, and with my dear sister and tag team partner, Barbara William Skinner, and my younger brother, Adam Taylor, who's running Sojourners now. I'm blessed to be here, and I think this is just the beginning of a faith movement, a faith that's going to restore democracy in this country. That's what we can do because of who we are as the children of God.
Thank you so much. Reverend Waller.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you both, Dr. Skinner and Reverend Jim Wallace. For members of Enon, I need you to know that when I grow up, I want to be Jim Wallace, just so that you appreciate who he is. Well, listen, we wanted to put this on the ground, and this is all over Pennsylvania tonight, and we have significant voices just to remind us of what's at stake. So I want to introduce, and these persons are going to take just a few moments to say from their perspective and where they are serving, why this conversation is so important. We have Rabbi Ron Simons, who's the Senior Director of Jewish Life of Greater Pittsburgh, PA. We have my friend and brother, Reverend Dr. Mark Kelly Tyler, who is the pastor of Mother Bethel AME Church here in Philadelphia. Rabbi David Strauss, Senior Rabbi, the Main Line Reformed Temple in Wynwood, PA. Sister Salima Suswell, President and CEO of Evolve Solutions in Philadelphia. Reverend Adon Marena, pastor of the West Kensington Ministry in Philadelphia. A dear sister, Reverend Dr. Phaedra Blocker, director of the Center for Care and Formation and Vitality at Palmer Theological Seminary of Eastern University in St. David's, PA. And a young giant from the center of the state, Reverend Walter Scott Thomas Jr., who is the pastor of First Baptist Church of Stilton, Harrisburg. They're each going to take, in that order, a few moments to remind us why this work is important and what's at stake for our community. We'll begin with Rabbi Simons.
Thank you so much to everyone. And let me begin by going backwards. Way back when in the Hebrew Bible, when Samuel was in charge around the year 1100 or so, it was assumed that his sons, Joel and Abijah, would be the next judges. But I got to tell you, the people, they weren't satisfied with Joel and Abijah because Joel and Abijah did not follow God's ways. They were bent on gain, they accepted bribes, and they subverted justice. Sound familiar? Just a little bit? And so the elders came to Samuel and said, we don't want to go on that way. Give us a king. And Samuel said, no, you're not going to want a king because here's what the king's going to do. And he tried to convince them, but he failed. And all the people came, not just a few people, not just the people who consider themselves to be privileged, not just the ones who were allowed to vote, but all the people came. And they said, give us a king so that we can be like all the other nations. I look back at that story and I am inspired that it takes the people to make the change that is needed when you think things are just going to go the same old way. And so we have that responsibility too. And when my colleague, Rabbi David Strauss, takes the floor, he'll tell you what we're doing from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh and everywhere in between in Pennsylvania on behalf of the Jewish community.
Thank you for that message, Ron. And I'm Reverend Mark Tyler from Mother Bethel in Philadelphia. Thank you, Pastor Waller. Thank you, Dr. Skinner. Thank you, Dr. Wallace, and other colleagues who are in the struggle together. Let me say this. I'll take you back as well, but not as far back, if that's okay, Ron. I'll just take you back to a few years. In 2018, during the last midterm, outside of the states where he resided, the state that Donald Trump visited the most during 2018 was Pennsylvania. In 2020, the state that he visited the most, was right there again at the top of the list, was Pennsylvania. Now, you may not think as Pennsylvanians that you're all that important, but presidents don't keep running to your state if you're not important. If your vote does not count, people don't spend sleepless nights trying to devise new ways in states like Texas and Florida and in Georgia to find a reason for you not to vote. Our struggle, and I know I'm preaching to the choir tonight, is to convince fellow Pennsylvanians, in particular, low propensity voters who have decided for whatever reason that their vote does not matter. Our votes absolutely matter. And so that means that we've got to inspire grandmothers and grandfathers and uncles and aunts and cousins and nephews and nieces to go out and find their friends, find their relatives, and let them know that literally democracy is at stake. That may not seem like much, but I've spent many times having conversations in the last year with persons who were wrongfully convicted in the city of Philadelphia, who thankfully for a new justice system that has risen in the city of Philadelphia and that has allowed them to come out of the places where many of them have spent 30 and 40 years for crimes that they did not commit. They will tell you that voting matters because they were not put in jail in the 80s and in the 90s by a government that fell from heaven, but they were put in prison by a government that was elected by the people. And so who we put in office on a local level in the city of Philadelphia matters. Who we put in Harrisburg matters. And who we put into the White House also absolutely matters. And so I'll say this, that as AME people across the state that made thousands of phone calls on last year in the 2020 election, a year and a half ago, and also in 2018 and in 2016, we stand ready to use our feet, to exercise our faith, to make telephone calls, to send texts and tweets and whatever it takes to get people to the poll. And thank you, Reverend Wallace, as I get ready to close, for reminding us that we cannot separate our faith from our politics. The only people that say that faith and politics don't go together in the Bible are the people who benefit from the status quo. Ask Moses if faith and politics are connected. Ask Esther if faith and politics are connected. Ask David facing down a Goliath if politics and faith are connected. Absolutely they are. And we live out our faith through our politics. So thank you for the opportunity. And I'm looking forward to us standing shoulder to shoulder in the upcoming primary and in the general election.
Rabbi Strauss.
Well, thank you, Reverend Taylor, because you've provided for me the perfect segue. I want to begin by saying I think the political is spiritual and the spiritual is political. We may not be partisan and we shouldn't be partisan, but the work that we are doing is deeply political and deeply spiritual, and the two are intimately joined together. My teacher, Rabbi Rick Jacobs, taught me that if you take out all of the passages in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament that deal with the poor, the widow, and the orphan, take those out, you don't have a lot left to read. It's 2 or 3 pages at most. I want to share with you a little bit about the work of RAC-PA. RAC stands for the Religious Action Center. It is our reform movement's social justice advocacy office in Washington, D.C. And in recent years, we've begun to create a number of statewide affiliates, including one in Pennsylvania, which I'm honored to be the co-chair of. In 2020, our tagline was "Every voice, every vote." We worked to make sure that as many people as possible were registered and then actually went out to vote, to educate people about Act 77 and to make sure that Act 77 in the state of Pennsylvania was adequately funded, and then to make sure that every vote would be counted. We're now engaged in a campaign called Just, and now you fill in the blanks. The first one is called Just Redistricting, which we've just concluded. Just Redistricting was about working to ensure that the redistricting process in Pennsylvania would be as open, as transparent, and as just as possible. The question, I think, is really simple. Who gets to decide? Do we elect our officials, or do our elected officials decide who gets to vote for them? We offer testimony before the Legislative Redistricting Commission, and I think we were successful, not in a perfect process, but in a process that was the most open and transparent in the state's history. We're now engaged in 2 processes simultaneously. One called Just Elections, making sure that Act 77 is adequately funded, that ballot boxes are distributed throughout the state within walking, if not easy driving or commuting distance or public transportation distance for all. And then a process called Just Voting. We want to, again, assure that everyone who is eligible to be registered is registered, and that everybody who can vote does vote. We're looking for partners to be able to engage in this work. And I hope that some on this call tonight we can reach out to and together assure that justice is pursued in elections throughout our state. Thank you.
Sister Salima.
Sister Salima.
Good evening, everyone, and assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Dr. Waller and Dr. Skinner, for having me this evening. Again, my name is Salima Saswell. I am a political strategist and political organizer. I serve as executive director for an organization called Engage Pennsylvania. Engage is a 501c3 organization that implements an ecosystem of programs to develop the capacity of the Muslim voter and also to ensure that our narrative is a part of the American fabric. So whether it's civic educational events, such as issue forums and town halls, or voter initiatives, such as GOTV, Get Out the Vote, and specific programs for youth in order to mentor and support the next generation of leaders, Engage is doing the work on a national level. We have chapters in Pennsylvania, New York, Michigan, Texas, Florida, as well as Virginia. During the 2020 election cycle, Engage worked on a campaign called the Million Muslim Vote Campaign, which helped to mobilize over 1 million voters, which was unprecedented for any election ever in this nation. And so we are very proud of the work that we have been doing to get out the Muslim vote and to establish a Muslim voting bloc, not just locally in Pennsylvania, but across this nation. And it is important that we continue to organize and exercise our right to vote in these elections, both local and national. As a Muslim who organizes in faith communities, I recognize the power of advocacy. Just here in Philadelphia, recently we were able to advocate for policy issues such as the recognition of Islamic holidays on the academic calendar for the Philadelphia public schools, which was done very successfully in 2015, and we continue to work with the school district to advocate for the unique needs of Muslim students. And now our students feel validated. They don't have to choose between education and faith on their holiday. There are also accommodations being made during this holy month of ours, Ramadan, as we have fasting students and Muslims who are fasting in various government offices. And so access to halal food, and also advancing issues such as education, affordable housing, and economic development, and criminal justice reform. The work that we are doing is important, and we need to elect the leaders that will have the same morals and values and the compassion, if you will, to establish the appropriate change for our communities. And so ensuring that communities are registered to vote and that they have a plan to vote is of paramount importance as we prepare for a crucial 2020 election cycle and for future elections. And so Engage is prepared to do that work. We are working with all faith communities as one in order to make a powerful impact for change. Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Alyn Mairena. I'm a Presbyterian Church USA pastor in North Philadelphia and also in Yaden, which is right outside of Philly near the airport. I had the blessing to have been here in West Kensington, right outside of Center City for about 15 to 20 years, and in Yaden for about 10. The blessing is I'm in the city predominantly in a Latino neighborhood, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Central American, and I also serve in Yaden, which is African American, and you can just imagine the blessing to take part in ministering to World War II African American veterans, and then in the urban setting of Philadelphia. What's at stake, and what have we done here at West Kensington Ministry in Yaden? Obviously, as has been mentioned, the preservation of our democracy. We've done everything here at the church from getting involved with the fair funding formula of schools, food relief, advocacy. We are a voting poll. We register, we've gotten involved in the census, and we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We have, for the last couple of years, immigration is always an issue. As you know, PA is ground zero for anti-immigration policy. Berks County has the most hate groups in the country. And what's at stake is how this hostile policy, how hostile intentional policy continues to be developed in our state. This policy makes it okay to dehumanize, to diminish the worth of our children. What's at stake is electing people who support, again, hostile policy that really wants to take us back to segregation. As you know, Berks County also has the largest ICE facility that we've been trying to shut down. I've worked with Juntos and Youth Sanctuary Movement in trying to get folks driver's licenses. We held a woman in sanctuary during the Obama administration. We've demonstrated to the point of arrest in DC and here in Philadelphia. Policy is, again, what's at stake and the development of it. Pennsylvania right now, we are the only state that does not certify bilingual teachers. Just think about that. We're the only state that does certify bilingual teachers. So what does that do to our young people that don't speak English? And the teachers union here in Philadelphia doesn't support that approach. We're also a state, and thank God Philadelphia is very different from the state where nurses also, the licensing of people coming from other states and other countries, their professional licenses aren't acknowledged. For example, if a nurse came from Puerto Rico and was credentialed over there, she is not able to be licensed here. And the nurses union, or whoever decides who can get licensed or not, allowed the Philippines and I think India to have their nurses be certified here or accept their licenses. And instead of allowing Puerto Rican nurses who fully, receive the education that's needed, instead of allowing the Puerto Rican nurses to be credentialed here and accept their licensing, they took away the licensing right for the Philippines and India. So there's the subtle, there's the intentional evil that's taking place, from licensing to immigration to the teachers union. What's at stake here, as we all know, is who is going to be the next governor, who's going to be our senator. As we know, our Congress is very divided, and we have an opportunity to put 2 Democrats in the Senate seat. Last thing I want to point out is how the Latino population in Pennsylvania is growing tremendously, and that means that there's a tax base that is also now contributing to the economy. And if you know that area, Bethlehem, York, Hazleton, Reading, they call it the 228 corridor. It's flourishing, and if it weren't for the new businesses that have been developed there, some of those small towns wouldn't exist. And again, some of those small businesses, folks that have been educated in their own country, getting nursing salons, hair salons, living wage jobs, they're not. They get a lot of obstacles when it comes to making a living. So what's at stake is policy, hostile policy, the continuation of it, who we get elected, and really valuing who we are, putting children in cages, Asian hate, the anti-Muslim sentiment after 9/11. And as we all know, the previous administration made it okay to do that. And it opened the floodgates. And obviously we're here to stop that. So thank you, everybody, for listening.
God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Waller, Dr. Skinner, for this invitation. And I would, of course, echo much of what has been said and will in some ways. What's at stake to me is the opportunity to stem the tide of what has been a very organized, strategic, decades-long effort to overturn any and all progress made in the struggle for civil rights in this country. The lesson I hope we have learned over the past few years, if not before, is that what seems like crazy on an ordinary day, as Pearl Cleage put it, can quickly become normalized. And then it can become policy, and then it can get legislated. And then that legislation protects and empowers the erosion of people's basic human and civil rights. And the folks who desire to use legislation as a way of mitigating a possible shift in power as the demographics of the country shift smell victory. They may have lost the battle of the last election, even if they're not willing to admit it, but they're still confident that they can win the war. Because if they're successful in structurally disenfranchising large numbers of Black and brown people, large numbers of poor people and other vulnerable peoples who haven't been manipulated by the weaponized fear employed against them, then it almost won't matter who runs for office, right? The whole concept of a free and fair election to select a representative government becomes null and void. And for me, that's not just a political issue, as Reverend Wallace says, that's a spiritual issue. Because in my faith tradition, as many of the traditions represented here, there is an essential belief that God desires the flourishing of all creation, of all peoples, and that those who worship God are called to be instruments of that flourishing. And so as a Christ follower, I understand that my following of Jesus and the transformative flourishing of my own soul requires that I seek to do what Jesus declared that he came to do, proclaim good news to the poor. Like, here's a way out of poverty, effect freedom for those caught up in bondage in different ways, whether it be prison, addictions, other things, help those who are so destructively blinded by so many falsehoods and delusions to see rightly, to set oppressed folk free to be their own whole, beautiful, God image bearing selves, and to let folks know that the grace and love of God is available without restriction, beyond measure, and with tangible effect. And all of that has to do with life in the here and now. The abundant life that Jesus talked about. It is not just some pie in the sky, by and by thing. And so that means that the people of God in the here and now have to be involved in making sure that the social and political tools, as well as the spiritual tools necessary to create even the possibility of flourishing, are available to everyone. And you know, as someone who is in an educational framework, that's important as in terms of how we train leaders, how we train pastors and other vocational leaders. It's the ethos of the seminary. It's the ethos of our university, which believes in faith, reason, and justice. And so as the ancestors would say, we got to pray walking, and we have to do this work. Thank you.
To Dr. Skinner, Dr. Waller, and Reverend Wallace, and all who have shared thus far this evening. My name is Walter Thomas Jr. I'm a pastor, First Baptist Church of Steelton in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm right here in the state capital in Dauphin County. I am a mix between Gen X and millennial. I'm born in 1981, so I'm right on that tightrope. And I must admit, the deconstruction of democracy is a reality that I did not think I would see. Myself and others of my generation, we grew up seeing and hearing about the fight for civil rights, how we were victorious, how we overcame. We saw the black and white videos. We heard of Dr. King and others fighting this good fight. And so because of that, and the way in which I was reared and raised, I always saw it as my responsibility to cast my vote, to encourage others to do the same, because there were those who died and fought for us all to have that right. There were those who were denied access to vote. They suffered through voter suppression. They suffered through poll taxes and other forms. They fought so that we could win. That's how I was raised, and others from my generation have been raised. We were taught these things, and some of us along the way began to, I guess, devalue what our vote really means. And because of that, we now live in this reality where there is a deconstruction of our democracy. We were raised believing that this battle had been won, but now we once again find ourselves maturing into the age and the point where voters' rights are being stripped down. The Voters' Rights Act has just about been all but dismantled. New anti-voter laws are now becoming the law of the land, and we are called, not just those in my generation, but generations that come before and the ones that will come after. We are called now to fight this fight so that we might win again. For years, we were taught about the value of democracy, but we did not know that was only as long as it fell with certain political agendas. Because now democracy and voting do not seem to have the value for everyone because it does not fall in line. The vote's not lining up with a certain party's agenda. Democracy is not lining up with a certain party's agenda or political affiliation. There are those who would rather us be described as autocratic than democratic. We must now fight this fight. We do not want to see voters' rights and civil rights become casualties to different political agendas. We must stand up because this moment is not just for now, but it's for next. It's not just for those of us who are now on this Zoom, but it's for our children and grandchildren who are coming behind us. We set the standard for them now. Just as we look at those who came before us, just as I watch the black and white films on TV sitting in classrooms, they will hear about what we do now and how we stand up for their future. In my local area, the recent redistricting of the Pennsylvania map has changed who will represent us in the community where our ministry is. And so now we are really helping people understand that it's critical now more than ever that we get out even in a midterm election and we cast our vote, because all the areas that we have been serving and ministering to are at stake. Decisions about communities, decisions about school funding, decisions about school districts that are already underfunded and how will they be treated going forward, decisions about areas that are suffering from food apartheid. All of these are at stake in our local elections this year. And so we at First Baptist are encouraging persons to vote. We are getting them out to register. We are making sure that we inform them about who's running for what offices and what it means for them personally. But we're also making sure that we're going to be utilizing the information and the tools that are in the toolkit that have been presented tonight. That there's a lot that has to be done, and all of us have so much going on with trying to minister in the age of COVID/post-COVID and family responsibilities as well. But here's the blessing and why I'm thankful to be here tonight. The blessing is that we do not have to do this alone. We are all in this together. We are all working together to make sure that we save our democracy and that we do have something that our children can look forward to be able to really enjoy the life, the liberty, and the freedoms that we have all been promised. We have not always benefited from them, have not always had them be reality, but we fight today that they might have it as a reality in their future.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters for reminding us what's at stake. And we said at the outset of this that we would ask for your attention for about an hour. And I want to thank you for being with us. But there's one more question. The question for some are, can we do what we're doing tonight? Have we broken some law? What are our rights? What is appropriate? We love throwing around this phrase, separation of church and state, which really is not in the Constitution and is something that Thomas Jefferson said that has been much maligned and misunderstood. But what are our rights? What can we do? What should we do? We have one more presenter, Ms. Pooja Chaudhuri, who's a Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. She's an election protection specialist here in PA. She's going to help us understand what are our rights. After she has come, we're going to ask Dr. Skinner to come back to remind you of the toolkit, and we're going to have a closing prayer. So I'm going to ask Ms. Pooja Chaudhuri to come and talk to us about our rights.
Thank you so much, Reverend. And thank you to Reverend Dr. William Skinner for inviting us and allowing us to be a part of the conversation. I will keep my presentation very short. but let me just figure out how to screen share this.
You are a co-host.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Can folks see my?
No, now we can. Yes, we can.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, my screen's a little bit of a mess. I have a lot of tabs open. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. I am an attorney with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in Washington, D.C. I've been there for nearly 6 years now, and have been working on voting for about 5. And Pennsylvania is, as one of the pastors said, a star state for us. We do a lot of work in Pennsylvania. We track what's happening in Pennsylvania. And we have a lot of election protection work that we do. So what is election protection? It is the largest nationwide nonpartisan voter protection coalition that convenes more than 100 organizations across the states, including the clergy. And we operate a hotline, 866-R-VOTE. And we take calls from thousands and thousands of voters in the different states who call us to share any challenges that they have faced at the polls. And we have a team of both lawyers and non-lawyers who answer these calls and provide help to voters on election day through early voting for all different types of elections. This year, we're planning field programs in 32 states, meaning that we are working with different organizations to train volunteers to go to the polls and monitor what's happening at the polls. Pennsylvania, I'm not going to get into the details, but Pennsylvania, because of Act 77, lots has changed, and for the better. Pennsylvania has a 50-day mail-in voting period. The voter registration deadline is 15 days prior to Election Day. Previously, it was 30 days prior to Election Day. At this point, all Pennsylvania voters can vote by mail, and that was the case in 2020. And in 2020, Pennsylvania saw a huge rise in voting by mail. And so that Act 77 makes that reality, and we encourage folks to vote by mail as well as vote in person. So what elections are up this year? All of it: governor, congressional, state house, state senate. May 17th, 2022 is the date of the primary. Voter reg deadline is May 2nd, and early in-person voting deadline is May 10th. So it's coming up. General election, November 8th, 2022, and the voter registration deadline is October 24th, early in-person voting deadline, November 1st. A lot of this was touched upon by others. But Pennsylvania is really ground zero for a lot of electoral changes, lawsuits. So we're definitely working in the state and watching. This year was the redistricting cycle. And so you may all know that the Supreme Court adopted congressional maps, and the United States Supreme Court declined to intervene in that. So we have congressional maps and in place for the May 17th primary. We also have state legislative maps. There are several pending challenges to those currently, but we anticipate that the maps that were passed earlier this year will be the ones that govern, both for the primary and the general. So 2022, we promises to be not only a challenging year, but also we're hoping that we have high turnout. We're hoping that folks get involved, and we are looking to lawyers and callers to help us get to that goal. And so we value our partnership with you, Dr. Skinner, and with each of the states. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. So for the sake of time, Dr. Waller, I think what we'll do is, as we've done in all the other webinars, we've gotten the copy of this presentation, which is really excellent. It has the basics, and people can take down the number 1-866-OUR-VOTE. You can call that number with any voting questions that you have. Let me just say in closing, we owe a debt of gratitude to our amazing state lead, Reverend Alyn, Dr. Alyn Waller. We just want to give him a hand, and we'll do it virtually, however we do it, because leadership counts, as Dr. King reminded us. Courageous and dedicated leader, that's who you are, and that's why we're gathered here as we are with a large number of people tonight. Remember that toolkit, you become now the expert. All of you are so smart, so amazing, all those testimonies. You have now the tools you need between the Lawyers Committee and what I shared with you in the toolkit. What I suggest the pastors and faith leaders do, you should be actually downloading the ballot as soon as you can get it, and host a meeting with all the people you have access to. Go over that ballot with them. That's what people are intimidated about. They don't know why they should vote for which of these 7 judges, which of these 5 school board members, which sheriff, which district attorney, what ballot changes, what constitutional changes. That's our work. And that really encourages people. They get more excited when they know what they're doing. And so I would encourage you to do that. Download the toolkit at turnoutsunday.com. And if you're interested in receiving updates on this campaign, we're going to go all the way through to the election, when we'll be organizing poll chaplain and the like. You don't want to be out of this. You have met tonight some of the amazing interfaith and multi-generational leaders. We have not all worked together. This is very exciting. This is exciting for me. And so we want to make sure that if you want to be part of this, in the chat there's a Google form. Just give us your contact. We'll make sure whatever we blast out, you are a part of that. And again, I'm a time conscious person. I think it's so important that we gave ourselves this time. I think that as we began in prayer, we want to end in prayer. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to my brother in ministry, Reverend Adam Taylor, President of Sojourners, to close us out. Adam Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Skinner. I just want to echo the thanks to all of you, to Dr. Waller, to all of the multi-faith speakers. And really, this campaign won't be possible without each and every one of you. And I'm so inspired by what I've heard tonight, and believe that working together, we can take the knowledge we've gained tonight, we can take the vision that has been cast and translate that into relentless action to protect the sacred right to vote and to protect our democracy. So let us join together as we close in prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for all that our ears have heard. We thank you for this campaign, Face United to Save Democracy. Lord, we thank you for all of these leaders from different faith traditions and generations and communities that have come together to protect something that we know is sacred, and that is the right to vote. Lord, we have been reminded tonight that each and every voter in Pennsylvania, each and every person is made in your glorious image. So we pray that we would treat them as holy, that we would combat and overturn and overcome every effort to deny the sacred right to vote in Pennsylvania, that we would work together to prevent any efforts to subvert election outcomes in the future. But God, we know we can't do this on our own, that we cannot do it with our feeble strength and our limited knowledge. No, God, we need you. We need you to be in the midst of this campaign, to bind us together and to show yourself strong in the great state of Pennsylvania. And so, God, work in and through us. Enable us to do your will so that we can truly protect the right to vote and help to save and protect our democracy. It's in your holy and precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being attentive to this. And thank you again, Dr. Waller, for your amazing leadership. You all have a blessed evening. And God protect you.
Amen.
God go with you.
Good night.
Good night now.